Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to another edition of the Flash Season 8 review series. And today I am going to be talking about episode 12, Death Rises, which I have just finished watching. And this episode I thought was absolutely fantastic and one of the best episodes of Season 8 so far. And I would definitely put this one also up there with the Armageddon 5-part special, because this episode was very dark, very emotional, and at certain points kind of felt a little bit like a horror movie. Not completely, but there were some moments that had some horror aspects to this, but overall I thought this was absolutely fantastic, and as I said, one of the best episodes of Season 8 so far. And this episode, once again, had yet another surprise in the form of a return of a familiar face, which I'll get to in a moment. But what I've enjoyed about Season 8 so far, especially in the last couple of episodes, they seem to be going back to Season 1 quite a bit. They've been addressing certain moments that have been happening in Season 1. So I can't help but feel that we're gearing up for the final season. I mean, we know that The Flash has been renewed for a Season 9, but this season, especially this episode and the last episode, definitely feels like we're coming to some big finale. Not entirely sure what it is, but we're definitely building up to something big. So I'm going to give a quick recap of what's happened so far, and then we're going to get straight into talking about episode 12. So over the course of Season 8 so far, we've been seeing this mysterious black flame going around, feeding on people's grief and leaving them in a charred mess, so to speak. So once this creature absorbs their grief, it just leaves them in a pile of ash, shall we say. Very horrific stuff. And we saw in episode 10 that this black flame was supposedly Ronnie. Now, the last time we saw Ronnie officially was in Season 1 when he sacrificed himself. Of course, we've seen doppelganger versions of Ronnie, but officially we haven't seen Ronnie since Season 1. And we saw in episode 11 Ronnie had supposedly returned from the dead and reunited with Caitlin. But we know this is the Arrowverse, this is the Flash, nothing is ever quite what it seems. And it was revealed at the end that Ronnie wasn't actually Ronnie at all. It was actually a monster called Deathstorm, and it's revealed itself to Caitlin, and that's how we ended episode 11, which sets up for episode 12. So this episode pretty much carries on from where we left off at the end of episode 11, and I thought they did an excellent job with not only continuing on from episode 11, but just taking things to the next level. And the way this episode ended just was absolutely mind-blowing. And it does raise even more questions for what could happen next. So, been some good stuff happening so far. I mean, I'm not going to lie, there has been a couple of episodes in the middle of this season that I wouldn't say have been terrible, but they haven't been great. But it looks like Flash Season 8 is starting to build up some strong momentum, and it's shaping up to be quite a good season, I think. And a lot of that, I would say, is down to the Armageddon 5-part special. You know, that really put things over in a big way, and, you know, I'm really enjoying where they're going with this at the moment, with this story arc with Deathstorm. So with that all said, let's not waste any more time. Let's get straight into it. Let's talk about episode 12, Death rises. So this episode opens up with a creepy montage set in outer space where we hear a creepy voiceover talking about life being an aberration, and it's revealed to be none other than Deathstorm, who was explaining about how he's come to take life and officially introduces himself to Caitlin. He explains to her that thanks to her, he is now complete, and then he is going to return the favour, and proceeds to attack her by draining her of her grief. Before he can finish the job, we see the Flash runs in and hits him with a lightning bolt, but it doesn't affect Deathstorm, and he retaliates by throwing one of his own back at the Flash. Now, my only issue I've had with the Flash, with the way his powers have been written, he's supposed to be the fastest man alive, but he gets hurt very easily. I mean, if you're supposed to be the fastest man alive, when a bad guy tries to hit you, you should just move out the way really fast. I've never really fully understood that, but it is what it is. That was the only issue I had with this episode. It's been my issue for quite some time, but that part in particular kind of bothered me a little bit. So we see Caitlin is dazed but appears to be unharmed. She tells Team Flash about Deathstorm and that it was not Ronnie and it's not even human. And Barry and Team Flash need to figure out how they're going to stop Deathstorm once and for all. Cecile senses that Barry is not just scared but hurting, and he reveals that Iris has been missing, but he gets a text that Iris has returned. He races home, but Iris won't let him touch her. Now, as we all know, that Iris has been experiencing some time sickness over the last few episodes, and anything she touches disappears. So we saw in the last episode she disappeared, now she's back. So there's something very strange going on. Barry goes to comfort Iris anyway, and she tells him that when she was in the Still Force this time, she didn't see her future and is worried that she doesn't have one. Elsewhere, we see a man waiting at the bus stop with a bouquet of flowers, and he is suddenly attacked by Deathstorm and killed, being left in a charred mess. Ugh. While waiting for Dion, Barry gets called away by the CCPD, and they are overrun with reports of a ghost demon going around attacking people. Kramer calls for all hands on deck, and the Flash has to tell that they don't currently know how to fight Deathstorm. The Flash reassures her that they will find his weakness just like they have done with every other villain they have faced. Kramer advises the police on the situation and tells them not to engage with Deathstorm, and also proceeds to have Central City shut down. At Star Labs, Team Flash keep getting dead ends. After realizing that Caitlin is struggling, Barry realizes that they can use Cecile to find Deathstorm via emotions. They come up with a plan, and Cecile is fully on board, knowing the dangers and the risks that she is putting herself in. Meanwhile, Caitlin and Frost talk, and Caitlin blames herself for the situation. We then see at home Barry and Iris' house. Dion finally shows up, and it turns out the Still Force has even messed up for him, and that he's infected too with the time sickness. And he explains that while he can see everybody else's future, he can't see Iris's, and the situation is getting dire. Dion comes up with the idea to use a tracker on Iris just in case she gets lost in time again. However, a moment later, he says that something is wrong, and then he disappears. Chester gets a device going, and Cecile gets to work trying to find Deathstorm with her empath powers. However, they discover that the call is coming from inside Star Labs, essentially, and when Cecile opens her eyes, we see that Deathstorm is communicating through her. He's taken over Cecile's body and tells Barry and Chester that they can't stop him, and the only way to survive is to give up Caitlin to him. Deathstorm says that he can't be stopped because even when you deal with grief, there's always the smallest bits left. Deathstorm releases Cecile, and she tells him that Deathstorm is never going to stop trying to get to Caitlin. And in the hall, Allegra is confronted by her dead cousin, Esperanza. We then see Allegra and Esperanza fight, but when Barry gets there, Esperanza is long gone. Allegra tells Barry that whatever confronted her fired back at her. Meanwhile, at the loft, Iris and Sue talk, and Iris starts to experience yet another weird episode, and Sue tries to talk her through it, telling her to concentrate on the present, and if that fails, anchor herself to Nora and Bart Allen. It works, and Iris doesn't disappear. At Star Labs, Barry is also struggling, and Joe goes to give him a pep talk, reminding him that all he has to do is be someone willing to fight no matter what the odds are, and they'll figure it out. He just needs to trust himself. Elsewhere, Caitlin and Frost realise that they are not alone, and sure enough, Frost is attacked by Deathstorm. With her out of the way, Deathstorm turns to Caitlin, and he takes her, but the team has no idea where he's taken her. The Flash heads out in hot pursuit, but he can't reach them as they are too high. Instead, the Flash uses some fancy properties on his new boots to literally ride the lightning and run up into the sky after Deathstorm. Now, this was actually quite a cool scene because, we've seen the Flash use his powers quite a lot in different forms, but this was actually the first time we've seen the Flashlight actually run in the sky. So I thought that was quite a nice touch. So as the Flash proceeds to catch up to Deathstorm, Deathstorm disappears with Caitlin into some portal. Caitlin and Deathstorm come out of the portal elsewhere in a carnival, and Deathstorm kills numerous people to power himself. That's when Deathstorm reveals that he doesn't plan to kill Caitlin. He's going to transform her into his bride, and he travelled across the stars for her. The Flash races there and finds her with a weird glowing energy in her eyes, and she tells him that Deathstorm said she isn't ready yet. Interesting stuff here. Back at Star Labs, Caitlin goes over her own medical tests, and she insists she's fine, but her cells are in a weird state, so she's not really aging the way she's supposed to be. She's also dealing with a massive amount of grief inside of her. She tells Team Flash about what Deathstorm said about wanting to make Caitlin his bride, and they realise he's going to gather up more grief and come to get her. Caitlin keeps having weird pain. Barry talks to Allegra and Chester and says that he recognises what is inside the portal. It's just like the singularity Chester was dealing with when we first met him in Season 6. It gives Chester the idea to use trans-dimensional particles by refitting the Mac that he used back in Season 8, but this time they're going to use it against Deathstorm. Frost volunteers to become the anti-Deathstorm due to the fact that Deathstorm and Frost both have cold fusion powers. And then at the end of the episode, back at the loft, we see Iris wakes up and she's confronted by none other than Eddie Thawne himself, who says it's so good to see her. And that's how we end episode 12. Overall, as I said, one of the best episodes of Season 8 so far. I really enjoyed this one a lot. And Eddie Thawne showing up at the end. We haven't seen Eddie Thawne since Season 1, when he sacrificed himself to have Eobard Thawne wiped out from existence. Of course, we know he came back anyway. And of course, we've seen Eddie Thawne in a couple of flashbacks along the way, but officially we haven't seen him since Season 1, so it's been a long, long time. And I'd like to think that this could be Deathstorm playing on Iris's grief, but if it's not, I really, really hope that they'll pull the trigger, make Eddie Thawne a bad guy, and make him Cobalt Blue, because I think that would be incredible, because Eddie Thawne, Barry Allen, and Iris West, there's a lot of unfinished business there. So that's definitely something I'd like to see for Season 8. Once they get wrapped up with the Deathstorm stuff, they definitely should go into the Cobalt Blue stuff, because, that's a big story arc to tackle. And I think, there's a lot of stuff you can cover there, especially with all the history with those three characters. But overall, I really enjoyed this one a lot. As I said, this was one of the best episodes of Season 8. And, we had a surprise last episode, Ronnie, and now we got Eddie Thawne back. So who knows what's going to happen next. But I'm really enjoying what they're doing at the moment, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen next. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What was your thoughts on episode 12? Did you enjoy it? What did you think about Deathstorm's plans for Caitlin and wanting to make her his bride? How do you think that's going to pull it off? And also, What about Iris's time sickness? How does that play into this as well? And also, what about the return of Eddie Form? Is it really him? Could it be Deathstorm playing a trick on Iris's grief? And if it really is Eddie Form, would you like to see him as Cobalt Blue, as the main villain for season 8? And also, what about Frost volunteering herself to become the anti-Deathstorm? Do you think they have a shot at defeating Deathstorm? And also, do you think there's a possibility that the Arrowverse could do the In Blackest Night story arc? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Flash Season 8 review series, where I am going to be talking about episode 13, which I am actually looking really forward to seeing, especially with the way this episode ended. Should be a good one, and I'm really looking forward to talking about it. So until next time, take care everybody and stay safe, and once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.